Okay, so today's chapter's name is Plant Nutrition. Types of nutrition. All living organisms need to take many different substances into their body. Some of these may be used to make new parts or repair old parts. Other may be used to release energy. Taking in useful substance is called feeding or nutrition. Useful substance. You must mind this word. Animals and fungi cannot make their own food. They feed on organic substances that have originally been made by plants. Some animals eat other animals, but all the substances passing from one animal to another were first made by plants. Animal nutrition is described in chapter 7. So fungi is another type of organism other than animals, plants, and they cannot make their own food. As we know, only green plants can make their own food by the process of photosynthesis. Now, since only green plants can make their food by photosynthesis, the main source of food for all of the living organisms are plants, and the plants get the energy from the sunlight. That is the energy from the sun, the solar energy. Okay. Green plants make their own food. They use simple inorganic substances, carbon dioxide, water, and minerals from the air and oxygen. Oh, and I forgot to mention, there is written organic substances. So organic substances means the substances which are made in the living organisms. So plants make food by the process of photosynthesis, that is glucose. So glucose is an organic product because the plant is making glucose. Okay, the oxygen is not an organic product because the plants are not making the oxygen. They use simple inorganic substances, carbon dioxide, water, and minerals from the air and soil. Plants build these substances into complex materials, making all the carbohydrates, lipids, proteins, and vitamins they need. Substances made by living organisms are said to be organic. So the plants, they use the inorganic substances to make the organic substances. That is, they have the enzymes, the process of the reactions that is used to convert these inorganic substances into organic substances. Photosynthesis. Green plants make the carbohydrate glucose from carbon dioxide and water. At the same time, oxygen is produced. If you mix carbon dioxide and water together, they will not make glucose. They have to be given energy before they will combine. Green plants use energy of sunlight for this. This reaction is therefore called photosynthesis. Photo means light and synthesis means manufacture. Key definition. Photosynthesis, the process by green plants manufacture carbohydrates from raw materials using energy from sunlight. So from here we can see that green plants have some special chemicals. We can guess special chemicals, or the organization of the chemicals are specially adapted to produce the carbohydrate glucose from water and in presence of sunlight, and also like oxygen is also produced as a byproduct, and water and carbon dioxide is needed. Okay, so first of all we see here chlorophyll. However, sunlight shining into water and carbon dioxide still will not make the reaction together, make them react together to make glucose. The sunlight energy has to be trapped and then used in reaction. Green plants have a substance which does this. It is called chlorophyll. So without chlorophyll, even if you have enough water, carbon dioxide and available sunlight, you cannot make glucose. You cannot make them react together to make a glucose. You need chlorophylls. Okay, and in your A levels you will learn that the chlorophylls has to be in a specific arrangement, and there are different types of chlorophylls, and they are a bit complex but very much interesting. Okay, photosystem, there are two types of photosystems, you will learn them. So chlorophyll is the pigment which makes plant look green. So chlorophyll is green in color. It is kept inside the chloroplasts of plant cells. So chlorophylls are kept in chloroplasts. So chloroplasts contain chlorophyll. So photosynthesis occurs in the chloroplasts. Okay. When sunlight falls on a chlorophyll molecule, some of the energy in the light is absorbed. The chlorophyll molecule then releases the energy. The released energy makes carbon dioxide combine with water with the help of enzyme inside the chloroplast. The glucose that is made contains energy that is originally in the sunlight. So in this process, light energy is transferred to chemical energy. I don't know what I have to explain from here because everything is so much simple. The sunlight, the chlorophyll traps the energy from the sunlight, and then after trapping it releases the energy which is used to combine carbon dioxide with water to produce glucose. And so the glucose is actually the chemical energy. So the chemical energy was originally the energy it was transferred from light energy to chemical energy. Okay, so the energy in the glucose was actually originally from the sunlight. You know, energy can be transferred from one form to another. You've learned in your physics, this is just like that. The photosynthesis equation, the full equation of photosynthesis is written like this: carbon dioxide plus water in presence of sunlight and chlorophyll makes glucose and oxygen, which is a byproduct. To show the number of molecules involved in the reaction, a balanced equation needs to be written. Carbon dioxide contains 2 atoms of oxygen and 1 atom of carbon dioxide. So its molecular formula is CO2. Water has the formula H2O. Glucose has the formula C6H12O6. Oxygen molecules contain 2 atoms of oxygen, and so they are written O2. The balance equation for the photosynthesis is, so first 6 CO2 plus 6 H2O in presence of sunlight plus chlorophyll makes C6H12O6 plus 6 O2. So I hope you guys know how to balance the equation, but if you don't know, I will explain it to you. Basically, first you write like this: CO2 plus H2O in presence of sunlight and chlorophyll, you write in full form, makes C6 H12 O6 plus O2. We should know that all of the chemical equations need to be balanced. So there is this side, the atoms of this side must be equal to the atoms of this side. So in this side there is 1 atom of carbon, and this side there are 6 atoms of carbon. So we put a 6 here. Now our carbon is balanced, but oxygen, now there are 2 multiplied 6 makes 12 plus 1 13. 13 molecules of oxygen, 13 atoms of oxygen in the left hand side. So there should be 13 atoms of oxygen in the right hand side. So there are 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. So more 5 oxygen is necessary. So if we write here 5 by 2, we get here this 2 and 2 cancels out, and so we get 5 molecules of oxygen. 5 plus 6 makes 13. But what about the hydrogen? There are 2 atoms of hydrogen and 12 atoms of hydrogen are there. So we put here a 6. 6 to the 12, 12. But now the oxygen is unbalanced. So here you want to give 5 by 2. Okay. So there are 6 to the 12 oxygen here and 6 oxygen here. So 18 molecules of oxygen on overall. So here we need 18 molecules of oxygen, but we have only 6. So we need 12 molecules of oxygen. So we put here a 6. 6 to the 12. So 6 CO2 plus 6 H2O. C6H12O6 plus 6 O2. Now our equation is balanced. So this is how you balance an equation. Now this is very important that you write a balanced equation, else your marks will be deducted from your CAI examinations. So leaves. Photosynthesis happens inside the chloroplast. This is where the enzymes and chlorophyll that catalyze and supply energy for the reaction. We know enzymes, almost all of the chemical reactions of the body, that is the metabolic reactions, require enzymes, and chlorophyll is needed to provide the energy. It traps the energy from the sunlight and it provides it for the reaction of photosynthesis. In a typical plant, most chloroplasts are in the cells in the leaves. A leaf is a factory for making carbohydrates. Leaves are therefore specially adapted to allow photosynthesis to take place as quickly and efficiently as possible. So the leaves, since the photosynthesis occurs in the leaves must be efficient to allow photosynthesis to occur. So how they are efficient, we will see now. Okay, so leaf structure. A leaf consists of a broad flat part called the lamina, which is joined to the rest of the plant by a leaf stalk or petiole. Running through the petiole are vascular bundles, which then forms the veins of the leaf. These contain tubes which carry substances to and from a leaf. Okay, you can see here in the diagram. So let me draw it roughly. So if this is the, it looks like a mango. Okay, so this is the leaf stalk or the petiole. And this part is the lamina. This part is the midrib. And these are the veins. Okay. Okay, so the veins, inside the veins are the vascular bundles which contains the xylem and phloem vessels. Xylem carries water and phloem carries it transports the glucose or the products which are made in plants from one part to another. Okay, so we will learn them here a bit later. Although a leaf looks thin, it is in fact made up of several layers of cell. You can see this if you look at a transverse section of a leaf under a microscope. So what is a transverse section? If we hold the leaf like this is the transverse section of the leaf. Okay, you can see this. So this will be the transverse section. So this is actually this part of the leaf. Okay, so for example, if this is this drawing and I put it like this, so this part is the transverse section. Okay, the diagram is like this. If I put it like this is the transverse section of the leaf. So we can see here the diagram of the transverse section of the leaf. Now let me explain this. The top and bottom of the leaf are covered with a layer of closely fitted cells called the epidermis. Upper epidermis, lower epidermis. Okay. These cells do not contain chloroplasts. Their function is to protect the inner parts of cells. Okay. Their function is to protect the inner layers of cells in the leaf. The cells of the upper epidermis often secrete a waxy substance that lies on top of them. It is called the cuticle, and it helps to stop water evaporating from the leaf. So the waxy substance above the upper epidermis is called cuticle, and this is actually like it prevents excess loss of water by evaporation from the leaves. Okay, so how does evaporation in leaf occurs? There are stomata, small opening on the leaf through which the water molecules can pass out. We will learn them. There is sometimes a cuticle on the underside of the leaf as well. In the lower epidermis there are small openings called stomata. Each stoma is surrounded by a pair of sausage-shaped guard cells which can open or close the hole. Guard cells, unlike other cells in the epidermis, do not contain chloroplasts. So see this, here is the stomata, and this opening is called the stoma. So if we look under the leaf, let me show you how does a stomata looks like. Okay, so the stomata is not in the transverse section, it is under the leaf. Okay, you need to learn to imagine. So the stomata is actually something like this. Yeah, and this is the hole, the stoma, through which water or carbon dioxide or any other atoms can pass through it, inside or outside this cell. Okay, and these are called the guard cells. These do not have chloroplasts. Yeah. Okay. So I forgot to mention that these guard cells can change its shape so that the size of the hole or the diameter of the hole changes, that the hole, the stoma, can close or open depending on the shape of the guard cell. Okay, so there are a lot of factors which causes a stomata to open or close. We'll learn them in homeostasis chapter, which you have in the later on. We will learn this. The middle layer of the leaf are called the mesophyll. From the image we can see the mesophyll. There are two types of mesophyll, spongy and palisade. These cells all contain chloroplasts. The cells nearer to the top of the leaf are arranged like a fence or palisade, and they form the palisade layer. Why are they arranged like this? They are arranged like this so that it allows the leaf to get the most amount of sunlight which it can use for photosynthesis. If it was not like this, if it was like this horizontal, then the light would have to penetrate through the layers, because there is a large cell vacuole. But because of this is not actually how it looks like. It looks like this, so that the highest amount of sunlight can pass to the chlorophyll molecules. Okay. The cells beneath them are rounder and arranged quite loosely with large air spaces between them. They form the spongy layers. So you can see that there are a lot of spaces. These are the air spaces. This allows diffusion of gases to occur rapidly. So running through the mesophylls are veins or vascular bundles. So here we can see the vein. I erased it, sorry. The vein here, this is the vein, and this is the transverse section of the vein. So this is the cross section, and this is the transverse section of the brain veins. And each vein contains large, thick-walled xylem vessels for carrying water. There are also small, thin-walled phloem tubes for carrying sucrose and other substances that the leaf has made. Okay, so nothing much to understand here. Yes, you need to, from this diagram, identify what is the palisade mesophyll cell, what are the spongy mesophyll cells, which is the xylem, which is the phloem. So xylems are thicker than phloem. You need to identify these. Palisade mesophyll cells are longer and arranged vertically, and the spongy mesophyll cells are rounder. The upper epidermis, lower epidermis, the stomata, the stoma. You need to identify them. You need to learn to identify them. Okay. So leaf adaptations. Leaves are adapted to obtain carbon dioxide, water, and sunlight because they need it for photosynthesis. So carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide is obtained from the air. There is not very much available because only about 0.04% of the air is carbon dioxide. Therefore, the leaves must be very efficient in absorbing it. The leaf is held out into air by the stem and leaf stalk, and its large surface area helps to expose it to as much as air as possible. As you know, the larger the surface area, the larger it is exposed to the air, and so greater amount of sunlight can the leaf can get greater amount of sunlight, and greater amount of diffusion of gases can occur. Okay, and also like they are held outwards by the stem and the leaf stalk, so that if they are all like bunched up, the leaves in the middle, they won't get that much sunlight or much diffusion of gases won't occur, so they are spread out. Okay, this is actually practical. You can see if you ever looked at a tree before. So yeah, that's it. Oh, and also look at these diagrams, these figures. These are important, and there are nothing much to explain in the figure, so I'm not going for it. And the cells which need the carbon dioxide are the mesophyll cells inside the leaf. So the mesophyll cells, spongy mesophyll and palisade mesophyll cells, needs the most amount of carbon dioxide because they contain the most amount of chloroplasts and chlorophylls, thus chlorophylls. So the carbon dioxide and water they need the energy from the chloroplasts to make glucose, so they need the most amount of carbon dioxide and water. Okay, the carbon dioxide can get into the leaf through the stomata. It does this by diffusion, which is described in chapter 3. Behind its stoma is an air space which connects up with other air spaces between the spongy mesophyll cells. The carbon dioxide can therefore diffuse to all the cells in the leaves. It can then diffuse through the cell wall and cell membrane of its cell and into the chloroplasts. Basically, it says how the route of the carbon dioxide, it goes through the stoma and then through the air space and then through the cell wall and then through the cell membrane and then finally into the cell. Yeah, and of course into the chloroplast, because that's where the photosynthesis reaction occurs. Water is obtained from soil. It is absorbed by the root hairs and carried up to the leaf in the xylem vessel. It then travels from xylem vessel to the mesophyll cells by osmosis, which was described in chapter 3. The path it takes is shown in figure 6.8 and 6.9. Nothing much to understand. We all know that the roots contain the root hairs, the root hair cells, which absorb the water by the process of diffusion. And I mean osmosis. This is water, and this is how then the xylem vessels, we have learned, they transport the water from the roots to the leaves. But they have to they have to work against gravity. How do they do this? That is by, they have the they are evaporating, and when they have the pull, that's why they have the pull upward, because since they are evaporating, they will be like being less dense, and the leaves are above the trees, so they can travel to the leaves, and then finally into the chloroplasts of the mesophyll cells. That is not much to understand. That is just a normal logic. Okay, you just have to learn every points of the book for your exam, and you have to understand them deeply. So sunlight, yes, sunlight is also necessary. The position of a leaf and its broad flat surface help it to obtain as much light as possible. I explained it. If you look up through the branches of a tree, you will see that the leaves are arranged so that they do not cut off light from one another more than necessary. Plants that live in shady places open a particularly big leaves to increase the surface area. Okay, the cells that need the sunlight are the mesophyll cells. That's because there's a photosynthesis occurs. Once again, I'm telling you. The thinness of the leaf allows the sunlight to penetrate right through it and reach all the cells. It is thin, it is not thick. If it is thick, it has to penetrate through a lot of layers, and so not all of the mesophyll cells can get the sunlight. Yeah. To help these, the epidermal cells are transparent with no chloroplast. The upper epidermis and lower epidermis, since they do not contain any chloroplast, and mesophyll cells contain the highest amount of chloroplast, they are actually transparent, so that the sunlight is not blocked or any barriers are there. Okay. In the mesophyll cells, the chloroplasts are arranged to get as much sunlight as possible, particularly those in the palisade cells. Why in the palisade cells? Because palisade cells out of the mesophyll cells contains the highest amount of chloroplasts. The chloroplasts lie broadside on. To do this, but in strong sunlight, they are often arrange themselves end on. That is, just like this. Say for example, what it said was actually very much simple. So if this is the palisade mesophyll cells, this is the large vacuole. The chloroplasts are arranged like this, end to end, so that they can get as much as light as possible. If they were arranged like this, they wouldn't get as much as sunlight as them. So they are not arranged like this, they are actually arranged like this. Okay. So yeah. Adaptation of leaves for photosynthesis are shown in table 6.1. Nothing much to explain here. Supported by stem and petiole to expose as much of the leaf as possible to the sunlight and air, I explained. Large surface area, I also explained. Thin stomata in lower epidermis to allow CO2 to diffuse in and O2 to diffuse out. You know, if the stomata is above, they cannot diffusion cannot occur much at a faster rate, but if the stomatas are below, diffusion can occur at a much faster rate. So airspace in spongy mesophyll cells, I also explained this. Chloroplast containing chlorophyll present in the mesophyll layers. Yeah. Palisade cells arranged end on. Chloroplast inside palisade cells often arranged broadside on. Chlorophyll arranged on flat membrane inside the chloroplast to exposure as much chlorophyll as possible to the sunlight. You can understand this too. Xylem vessels with short distance of every mesophyll cells to supply water to the cells in leaves, some of which will be used in photosynthesis. Water is very necessary. Phloem tubes with short distance of every mesophyll cells to take care of sucrose and other organic products of photosynthesis. You have to learn by heart this whole table, but first you have to understand. Okay, so this is actually not tough, and I don't see anything to explain here because I have already explained about 90% of it, and the other you can understand if you read. Oh, study tip. Note that chlorophyll does not attract sunlight, it absorbs energy from the light. Okay, so uses of glucose, which is made by photosynthesis. One of the first carbohydrate to be made in photosynthesis is glucose. There are several things that may happen that may then happen to it. Figure 6.11. Sucrose is used for fruit growth or stored in fruits. That is, glucose is first converted to sucrose. Sucrose is used for shoot growth, and then glucose is converted to starch, to sucrose. Starch is converted to glucose in the leaves. Sucrose is transported in the phloem tubes. Sucrose is used for root growth or stored in roots as starch, but the initial product is glucose, and then it is converted and used. Okay, so used for energy. Energy may be released from glucose in the leaf. All cells need energy, which they contain by the process of respiration. Some of the glucose which a leaf makes will be broken down by respiration to release energy, and thus leaves contain mitochondria too. Stored as starch. So glucose may be turned into starch and stored in the leaf. Glucose is a simple sugar. It is soluble in water and quite a reactive substance. It is not therefore a very good storage molecule because it will react. First, being reactive, it might get involved in a chemical reactions where it is not wanted. Secondly, it would dissolve in water, and around the plant cell and might be lost from the cell. Thirdly, when dissolved, it would increase the concentration of the solution of the cell, which could cause damage. That is the difference in water potential, you know. Osmosis water may leave the cell, or a lot of water may diffuse in the cell, and so like anything may happen. But since the glucose is also water soluble, it may leave the cell. So not much to explain here. The glucose is therefore converted into starch to be stored. Starch is a polysaccharide made of many glucose molecules joined together. Being such a large molecule, it is not very reactive and not very soluble. It can be made into granules which can be easily stored inside the chloroplast. So granules are basically, you know, like this. These are granules, you know, granules. That is into small sets or small parts, small substance. That is a small a set of, say, starch, a really small bunch of starch. It's called starch granules. Okay. Hmm? So starch granules. So in the chloroplasts there are starch granules. Used to make proteins and other organic substances. Glucose may be used to make other organic substances. The plant can use glucose as a starting point for making all the other organic substances it needs. These includes the carbohydrate, sucrose and cellulose. Plants also make fats and oils where glucose is necessary. That is, glucose is converted into whatever is necessary by the plant, and in this metabolic reaction enzymes are of course involved. So plants can also use the sugars they have made in photosynthesis to make amino acids which can be built up into proteins. To do this they need nitrogen, because amino acids contain nitrogen. You know, the amino acids, one is amine group, NH2 group, and one is COOH group, that is the acid groups. So the NH for the amine group you need nitrogen along with glucose. And unfortunately, even though the air around us is 78% nitrogen, this is completely useless to plants because it is very unreactive. So the gaseous nitrogen cannot be used. So what happens? Plants have to be supplied with nitrogen in a more reactive form, usually at nitrate ions. They absorb nitrate ions from the soil through their root hairs by diffusion and active transport. Active transport is actually, you know, if you say move a substance from lower concentration to an area of higher concentration, you need to give energy because you are doing work against the concentration gradient. Okay, so that is active transport. So wait, where was I? Okay. The nitrate ions combine with glucose to make amino acids. The amino acids are then strung together to form protein molecules by polymerization process. Another substance that plants make is chlorophyll. Once again they need nitrogen to do this, and also another element, magnesium. So chlorophyll contains nitrogen and magnesium. The magnesium, like the nitrate ions, is absorbed from the soil. Table 6.2 shows what happens to a plant if it does not have enough of these ions. Table 6.12 shows what happens when a plant does not have enough nitrogen. So you have to learn by this table. Okay. There is nothing to make you understand here. Farmers often add extra mineral ions to the soil in which the crops are growing to make sure they do not run short of these essential substances. Changed to sucrose for transport. A molecule has to be small and soluble to be transported easily. Glucose has both of these properties, but it is also rather reactive. So sucrose is less reactive than glucose, but it is soluble and small, almost just like glucose. It is therefore converted to complex sugar sucrose to be transported to other parts of the plant. Sucrose molecules are also quite small and soluble but less reactive than glucose. They dissolve in the sap of the phloem vessels and can be distributed to whichever part of the plant that needs them. So what is meant by the sap of the phloem? So basically the fluid inside the phloem is called the sap of the phloem. Okay. So the sucrose may later be turned into glucose, again to be broken down to release energy, or turned into starch and stored or used to make other substances which are needed for growth. So we can they can do anything to it, whatever they need. So testing leads for starch. Iodine solution is used to test for starch. A blue-black color shows that starch is present. However, if you put iodine solution on a leaf which contains starch, it will not immediately turn black. This is because the starch is inside the chloroplast in the cell. The iodine solution cannot get through the cell membranes to reach the starch and react with it. So you may not get the perfect results because the chloroplast are inside and the starch can pass through the membranes to go to the starch molecule. The iodine cannot pass through the membranes to travel to the starch molecules and then react to change color. So what we have to do? Another difficulty is that green color of the leaf and the brown iodine solution can look black together. It may look black. Therefore, before testing a leaf for starch, you must break down the cell membranes and get rid of the green color. How is it done? The way this is done is described in activity 6.2. You need to first, if you read this, okay, the cell membranes are first broken down by boiling water, and then chlorophyll is removed by dissolving it with alcohol. Very easy. Okay. So then there are some activities you have to read this, and if possible I suggest you to perform these activities in your school laboratory so that you can understand it, more clear. Controls. If you do activity 6.3, 6.4 and 6.5, you can find out yourself which substance a plant needs for photosynthesis. Okay, so first of all, I'm not going to go details in the controls, but what I'm going to explain you about controls is, say you are performing reactions, chemical tests to identify a substance if it is present or not. So first of all, like you need you need something to compare with. You need something to compare the results with. So what you usually do is that you first of all perform it with a known sample which contains the substance, and then after you get the sample, you perform it again with the samples, and then you compare it with the the first sample which contain that specific chemical, specific substance which you are looking for, so that you can know that this is the like color change, or this is the site or which you can see, or this is the change that occurs if that substance is present. So this is what is called control. You will need this in your paper 3, and so understand this very nicely. Okay, so these starching plants, it is very important that leaves you are testing should not have any starch in them at the beginning of the investigation. If they did and you found that the leaves contain starch at the end of the investigation, you couldn't be sure that they had been photosynthesizing. The starch have been made before the investigation began. So if you are, say for example, investigating if photosynthesis produce starch or not, initially the leaves will contain some starch, and so after photosynthesis, if starch is formed or not, you'll get a positive result for a starch test. So first you have to distarch the leaf so that you can perform the test after photosynthesis begin, and then get the results if photosynthesis is the reason for the starch is produced or not. So how do we distarch leaves? So before doing any of these investigations, you must distarch the plants. The easiest way to do this is to leave them in a dark cupboard for at least 24 hours. The plants cannot photosynthesize, so they are in cupboard because there is no light. So they use up their stores of starch. To be certain that they are thoroughly discharged, test a leaf for starch before you begin. What it said here is that you must first keep it in a cupboard where there is no sunlight, so they cannot produce more starch, and the starch which they produced before will be used up. So after that you can test for starch test after some time when it is photosynthesizing. But before starting the experiment, how will you know if sorry, all of the starch has been used up? You will perform a starch test. Okay, so now these are the activities. I want you guys to perform these activities in your school laboratory, or if you have a laboratory in your home. So limiting factors. Okay, if a plant is given plenty of sunlight, carbon dioxide and water, the limit on the rate at which it can photosynthesize is its own ability to absorb these materials and make them red. However, quite often plants don't have unlimited supplies of this material, and so their rate of photosynthesis is not as high as it might be. That is, if you give ample of like every chemicals like carbon dioxide, water, and also sunlight, you cannot expect that it is going to photosynthesize. The rate of photosynthesis will be increasing indefinitely, because the number of chlorophylls, the number of chloroplasts in a leaf is limited. So first of all, say 20% of the chloroplasts will be working, and then once it is increased to 100%, no matter how much more water, carbon dioxide and sunlight you give to the plant, they cannot increase after a specific rate. That's because the chloroplasts are limited. So the chloroplasts, for that example, is actually acting as a limiting factor. That is, it restricts the rate of photosynthesis because it is limited in supply. Okay, so you can see this graph: rate of photosynthesis by light intensity, rate of photosynthesis by concentration of carbon dioxide. Same goes for rate of photosynthesis by temperature. And so, okay, first of all, sunlight. In the dark, a plant cannot photosynthesis at all. In dim light, it can photosynthesize slowly. As light intensity increases, the rate of photosynthesis will increase until the plant is photosynthesizing as fast as it can. At this point, even the light becomes brighter, the plant cannot photosynthesize any faster. Why? Over the first part of the curve between A and B, light is the limiting factor. The plant is limited to how fast it can photosynthesize because it does not have enough light. You can see this because when the plant is given more light, it is photosynthesizing faster. Between B and C, however, light is not a limiting factor because there is ample of light there available. You can show this because even if more light is shown on the plant, it still cannot photosynthesize any faster. It already has as much light as it can use. That is, everything has its limit. Limiting factor, key definition: something present in the environment in such short supply that it restricts life processes. Nothing much to understand, make you understand here. Carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide can also be a limiting factor. The more carbon dioxide a plant is given, the faster it can photosynthesize up to a point, but then a maximum is reached. So initially carbon dioxide is going to be a limiting factor, but once the maximum rate has been reached, even if you give more concentration of carbon dioxide, the rate of photosynthesis will be constant because there are some other factors which is limited, and so that's why it can photosynthesize faster. So once the the curve is constant, after increasing it becomes constant, the carbon dioxide is not a limiting factor. Other things are limiting factor, but once the curve is increasing, carbon dioxide is a limiting factor, because if you give more carbon dioxide, the rate keeps increasing. So carbon dioxide is the limiting factor, but when it is constant, carbon dioxide is not the limiting factor. Temperature. The chemical reactions of photosynthesis can only take place very slowly at low temperatures, so a plant can photosynthesize faster on a warm day than on a cold one. That's because the enzymes, the optimum temperature, the optimum, this is the reaction rate temperature. This is actually the curve of the enzyme. This is the optimum temperature. You should know this, and different enzymes have different optimum temperatures. Okay, stomata. The carbon dioxide which a plant uses diffuses into the leaf through the stomata. If stomata are closed, then photosynthesis cannot take place. Stomata often close if the weather is very hot and sunny to prevent too much water being lost, because if there is not much water, the chemical process will not occur, and also photosynthesis cannot occur, and so there will be no food, there will be no the cytoplasm will lack the water, and so it will become flaccid, and that can't happen. And this change that makes the stomata close is called homeostasis. You learn in the later chapters. This means that on a really hot day, photosynthesis may slow down. Growing crops in glasshouse. When plants are growing outside, we cannot do much about changing the conditions that they need for photosynthesis. If a field of sorghum does not get enough sunlight or is short of carbon dioxide, then it just has to stay that way. Sorghum is a type of plant, okay? Because you cannot help, you cannot increase the sunlight, you cannot do anything. But if crops are grown in glass house, then it is possible to control the conditions so they are photosynthesizing as fast as possible. Because in a glass house, we can change the condition of the environment of the glass house. For example, in parts of the world where it is often too cold for growth of some crop plants, they can be grown in heated glass house. So that you can heat it so that the enzymes have the optimum temperature. Okay, this is done, for example, with tomatoes. The temperature in glass house can be kept at optimum level to encourage tomatoes to grow fast and strongly and to produce a large yield of fruit that ripens quickly. You don't have to learn this is tomato or potato. You just learn that glass house can be used to set the environment that the plant needs to grow and develop in its optimum rate. Okay, light can also be controlled in a cloudy or dark condition. Extra light can be provided, so light is not limiting the rate of photosynthesis. The kind of light that are used can be chosen carefully so that they provide just the right wavelengths that plants need. You know, all of the lights are not of the right wavelength. Now don't ask me what is a wavelength. If you should have physics and you should have learned what is wavelength. So they need the wavelengths which is equivalent to the wavelength of the sunlight. Okay. In tropical countries, the problem may be the temperature and lightness are too high. Both of these can be reduced by shading the plant from direct sunlight. This could be inside a closed glass house, but this will usually need to have windows or parts of the roof that can be opened to allow hot air to escape. It is often simpler and just as effective to provide shade by growing taller plants nearby or providing a simple roof over the crop plants. Okay, so this is actually normal. Carbon dioxide concentration can also be controlled. Carbon dioxide is often a limiting factor for photosynthesis because its natural concentration in the air is very low. In closed glass house, it is possible to provide extra carbon dioxide for the plants. The importance of photosynthesis. Photosynthesis is of importance not only to green plants but to all living organisms. It is the basic reaction which brings the energy of the sun into ecosystem. So what is an ecosystem? We'll learn in the next chapter. The flow of energy in ecosystem is one way, so there is a constant need for replenishment for the energy source and therefore a constant need for photosynthesis. Photosynthesis is also essential for maintaining a constant global level of oxygen and carbon dioxide. Oxygen is given off, is available for respiration. Carbon dioxide produced by respiration from the combustion of fuels is used in photosynthesis. So it maintains the level of carbon dioxide and oxygen in our atmosphere, in our environment around us, okay, from rising to high. Carbon dioxide produced by respiration and from the combustion of fuels is used in photosynthesis, which helps to stop the levels of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere from rising to high. And this part of the ecosystem flow of energy, leave it in the next chapter. The later chapters, there is a chapter called ecosystem. You will learn about this. Okay, so this is the end of the chapters. End of this chapter. Thank you. Okay, so one more thing I want to say is that investigate the necessity for chlorophyll, light and carbon dioxide for photosynthesis using appropriate controls. These are actually the activities of the books. Okay, you have to read them out thoroughly, and once you understand my notes, you can understand what the activities told you to.